Sunny Hostin, a co-host on The View, sat confidently at the round table, her voice laced with certainty as she rattled off her latest claim. According to her, a solar eclipse, an earthquake, and the cicada cycle were all connected to climate change.
Karen Dupiche, our wonderful makeup artist, when the earthquake was happening, she put her coat on and she was like, Jesus is coming.
I'm out.
I'm out. I'm leaving. We've got a solar eclipse. We've got the earthquake. She ran down the hallway.
The rapture is here.
The rapture's here. And then also I learned that the cicadas are coming.
The audience nodded along, some shifting in their seats, unsure if they had heard her correctly, but Hostin was unfazed. When one of her co-hosts hesitantly pointed out that cicadas emerge every 17 years like clockwork, she dismissed it with a casual wave.
No.
Well, this is what I read.
There's two different kinds of cicadas.
Yes, two different times are coming.
The good cicadas and the...
It was a textbook moment where blind ideology bulldozed over basic scientific fact, and Elon Musk? He wasn't about to let it slide. Within hours, Hostin's claim became the subject of widespread online mockery, with fact-checkers and social media users alike calling out the absurdity of linking natural events to climate change. But the most cutting response came from Musk, who saw this as yet another example of ideology distorting reality. Rather than directly refuting Hostin, Musk highlighted the deeper issue: how media figures push narratives without considering basic scientific facts. His sharp-witted remark about blaming gravity on capitalism wasn't just sarcasm. It underscored how misinformation thrives when ideology replaces critical thinking.
One bias that I think are very dangerous is that it's often anti-meritocratic. You can't question things. Even the questioning is bad. So,
expanding on his point, Musk likened modern media hysteria to historical moments of intellectual suppression, suggesting that if The View had existed centuries ago, they would have condemned Galileo for challenging established dogma. The comparison was striking. Just as the church once resisted scientific truth, today's media elites, according to Musk, resist logic in favor of agenda-driven narratives. For Musk, this wasn't just about Hostin's blunder. It was a warning about the broader consequences of media platforms prioritizing emotional storytelling over factual accuracy. Musk's critique of Hostin extended beyond her specific remark. It was a condemnation of a broader trend in mainstream media, where emotional narratives often overshadow factual discussions. To him, her dismissive response, "Well, that's not what I read," wasn't just an offhand comment. It was emblematic of a culture that prioritizes ideological allegiance over intellectual honesty. Instead of engaging in genuine discourse, figures like Hostin, Musk argued, default to rejecting inconvenient truths in favor of pre-approved narratives. This, he warned, is the real danger, the normalization of misinformation under the guise of truth-seeking. For Musk, the so-called woke mind virus isn't merely about exaggerated political correctness, but about the erosion of rational thought. He has frequently voiced concerns that the media, rather than serving as a check on misinformation, has become one of its primary sources. The real issue, he suggested, isn't that figures like Hostin make mistakes, it's that they refuse to be corrected and instead double down when confronted with facts. This mindset, Musk believes, fosters a culture where misinformation thrives unchecked, not because people lack access to facts, but because acknowledging them has become politically inconvenient. In this environment, dissent is vilified, debate is stifled, and truth becomes secondary to ideological loyalty. The internet, as expected, erupted with polarized reactions. Supporters celebrated Musk's takedown, viewing it as a much-needed call-out of media hypocrisy. Many praised his ability to expose mainstream narratives with sharp humor and brutal logic. Comments flooded in, comparing his response to a reality check The View desperately needed. Critics, however, saw it differently. Some dismissed Musk as a provocateur, arguing that he was more interested in stirring controversy than fostering real discussion. Others questioned why a billionaire was so invested in daytime talk show debates. But despite the backlash, one thing was undeniable: Musk had struck a nerve. His response wasn't just a critique of Hostin's remarks, but a broader commentary on how misinformation and ideological bias shape media discourse. Whether people agreed with him or not, they were talking about it, and that in itself was a victory. Musk's critique wasn't just about calling out Hostin's misstep, it was about exposing a larger issue within modern media. He pointed to a culture where emotion-driven narratives often take precedence over objective truth, leaving viewers misinformed rather than enlightened. Figures like Hostin, he suggested, have abandoned intellectual rigor in favor of sensationalism, prioritizing viral moments over factual accuracy. This growing pattern, Musk argued, was eroding public trust in the media. If they couldn't even present basic scientific truths correctly, why should audiences rely on them for more complex issues? The impact of this debate extended far beyond the Views segment. It underscored the increasing skepticism toward mainstream news outlets, as more people questioned whether they were being given facts or just another dose of ideological spin. And with influential voices like Musk refusing to let media figures off the hook, the once unquestioned monopoly on truth was showing cracks. The more these narratives were exposed, the more audiences started seeking alternative sources, ones that valued logic over fear-mongering. As the dust settled, mainstream media outlets scrambled to control the narrative. Predictably, The View avoided addressing the controversy head-on. Instead of acknowledging the absurdity of Hostin's remarks, the panel doubled down. The next day, Joy Behar vaguely alluded to the backlash, brushing it off as right-wing attacks on free-thinking women. Hostin, for her part, remained composed on air, but insiders reported she was not happy behind the scenes. Meanwhile, major news networks tried their best to spin the situation. Some claimed Musk was simply picking on women of color, while others suggested that his followers were manufacturing outrage. But the damage had already been done. Online, the conversation refused to die down. Fact-checkers rushed in, reluctantly confirming that cicadas emerge on a predictable cycle and have nothing to do with climate change. Even left-leaning scientists distanced themselves from Hostin's claims, unwilling to tie their credibility to such an obvious blunder. Musk, known for his relentless approach to challenging mainstream narratives, wasn't going to let the discussion fade away after a single viral moment. Later that night, he participated in a live X Spaces discussion, where the conversation naturally shifted toward media accountability. Without directly mentioning The View, he pointed to a much deeper issue: the cycle of misinformation being rewarded rather than corrected. According to Musk, the real danger wasn't just a single flawed statement on daytime television, it was a media culture that thrived on sensationalism and division. He emphasized that when incorrect claims are met with applause instead of scrutiny, the result is a public that becomes increasingly distrustful of the media's credibility. This, he suggested, was why independent voices, ones not bound by corporate interests or ideological bias, were gaining more traction. The contrast was striking. While traditional news outlets continued to push narratives without accountability, figures like Musk engaged in direct conversations with their audiences, fostering transparency. This, he implied, was the future of the media, one where people no longer relied on legacy institutions for truth, but instead turned to those willing to challenge the status quo. As Musk's criticism continued to gain traction, The View faced an undeniable backlash, not just in online discussions, but in tangible numbers. That week, their ratings saw a noticeable dip, a clear indication that audiences were growing weary of one-sided narratives and unchecked misinformation. Social media platforms, once a space where their narratives often went unchallenged, became flooded with skepticism, even from longtime viewers. The shift in sentiment wasn't just about one segment or one debate. Musk had tapped into a much larger issue: the declining trust in mainstream media. For years, networks like The View had operated with a level of impunity, presenting opinion as fact and dismissing dissenting voices without consequence. But in an age where audiences could fact-check in real time and engage directly with influential figures, that dominance was eroding. What Musk's response revealed was the growing impatience with media personalities who prioritized ideological narratives over journalistic integrity. The more figures like Hostin dismissed criticism without accountability, the more they alienated viewers who were no longer willing to accept surface-level analysis. The implications were clear. This wasn't just a temporary controversy, it was a reckoning. And if The View and similar platforms failed to adapt, their credibility wouldn't be the only thing at risk. So would their influence. So far, Hostin has remained silent on Musk's comments. But if history is any indication, The View won't take kindly to being embarrassed on such a public scale. Will they ignore the backlash, try to spin the narrative, or go on the offensive? One thing is certain, this won't be the last time Musk takes on the mainstream media. And judging by the reaction to his takedown, people are more than ready to watch the battle continue. Elon Musk's dismantling of Sunny Hostin wasn't just another media clash, it was a wake-up call. The world saw in real time how misinformation thrives when left unchecked. But this debate, it's far from over. As mainstream media clings to its old ways, voices like Musk's are reshaping the landscape, demanding accountability and forcing tough conversations. The real question is, will the media learn from this or will they double down? What do you think? Is Musk exposing the truth, or is this just another media spectacle? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on the latest stories shaking up the media.